Hello everybody and welcome back to Gardens and Crystals with me, Wesley Peterson, and today is the 22nd of June 2021 and I've decided to do a garden tour video for you all because I have so many different projects that I'm doing around and about in the garden in different areas that I want to give you more of a perspective of all the different garden areas we have and how the garden is divided up. So our garden is around about 4,500 square meters and I've divided it up into many different areas, and when I post on my Instagram I always put the name of the different area in my garden where I'm posting pictures of plants or projects that I'm doing, and I want to take you for a walk around so that you can actually see where those different areas are in relation to each other and how they flow into each other and the different kind of plants that can be found in these different areas. For example, look at this wonderful peony next to me right here, right now. I have two different colours, a lovely white colour and a lovely pink colour, and they're all starting to bloom out now. I've counted around about 15 blooms and I am so happy about that. These are holding themselves up. They have flopped, they are drooping, they get too heavy for themselves because they actually grow out quite tall and then they flop as the flowers come out because they're quite big, but they're not on the floor, so that's quite nice. I do have another bunch that I've put a prop up yesterday because they were hanging over quite a lot into one of the pathways here, but other than that they do quite well. Next year I might put rings around them just to keep them right up, and I would like to plant a few more and bush out this area some more. So I just wanted to start my video here to show you these wonderful plants, and then I will go behind the camera and show you lots of different areas in the garden as we go along. So let's get on with the tour. So we'll start on our terrace here in our Courtyard Garden area, and as you can see I've placed some of my clear quartz crystal outside, different types that are collecting the sun's energy. And as we pan around here you can see the Botanical Garden area where I have a lot of various different shrubs, plants, trees, and lots of small borders surrounded with rocks. So now you can see here we have our seating area up on the terrace, and as we go down into the Courtyard Garden area you can see our annex on the other side and our sunbeds. This is the largest open grass area we have in the whole garden, and I have just finished reorganizing these two borders that are flanking the door to our annex and the area where we have a guest sleeping area. And I planted last year these lovely tall ferns that were two plants, two balls that I split and placed so they became three, and they are flushed out beautiful and tall as high flanking plants behind everything else, but they don't get taller than this, so I know they're not going to cover the windows. So they're a perfect height. And then in front of them I've actually planted out this woo that I had in my white ceramic pot. I've planted those in the middle here. I had two plants and I'm going to leave those to flush out. They get lovely huge leaves and they can become huge plants in their own right with time, so they are going to fill out the middle area in front of these ferns and have a different contrast in the leaves. Beautiful. In front of those I've planted two boxwoods and a rock, and that is to give us winter interest because everything else at the back here is going to die back and be completely gone for the winter. So we need to make sure we have winter interest when we come out into our Courtyard Garden, so we'll still be able to see the boxwoods all winter and the rocks, and they're going to look wonderful. And also at the front, Haucera Paris, that I split some mother plants up into smaller pieces, and I've done that all the way around the front of these borders, and they have these lovely pink flowers that really boost the different colours of green in this area and the white and red behind of the annex, and they are going to flush out and fill out this area even more. And I might, I'm not sure, put another kind of Haucera in a different colour here, maybe an orange to give some contrast, or I might put some variegated hostas in there to fill it out even more. But this is a project that I only did yesterday. So today is the 22nd of June 2021. I did this yesterday on the 21st. So these Halka at the front are a little bit floppy at the moment, but they will be standing up and look beautiful in no time. I think these really do frame my annex absolutely beautifully. So we'll just go in for a closer look at these borders here so you can see how wonderful all these different types of plants look together and the different foliage they have. And this is just the beginning, so just think how this will look when it's all filled out a lot more. And here I planted out a rhododendron. And these Thea occidentalis Brabant have been in a wooden frame since I bought them, and this has been around 4 years now, and they've grown wonderfully. Open bottom so that they can grow out into the ground themselves. And here you can see some of the elephant grass that I moved from another border and put into pots here that's starting to grow up. It should get around 2 meters tall or so. So while we're still here in our Courtyard Garden, I have the annex behind me here, and I decided to plant this beautiful rhododendron in this border of stones that I put around the edge, and I filled this area up with lots and lots and lots of leaves. This plant loves an acidic soil, so it was planted in garden soil and then filled up with all the leaves from our crystal woods, and it has loved it. It's starting to flush out more new leaves. It's just finishing its flowering here. These flowers, when they come out, they start a kind of darker purple colour and they get a lighter and lighter pink as they go along. And I think they're absolutely beautiful. So this plant transplanted from Joachim's Corner to this area earlier this year, and it's done very well. And I just want to say that if you're living in Sweden or in a cold climate, rhododendrons are a fantastic plant for you. This plant will give us this green interest all year round. So during the winter, when we look out of our kitchen into our courtyard garden, over to the annex, we will have this lovely green colour against the red backdrop, and it looks beautiful. And then we know during the summer, we will get these beautiful flowers as an extra boost. But the plant itself is just gorgeous, and this one is just going to fill up and fill out this space wonderfully here. I have planted out so many different varieties and colours of rhododendron in Joachim's Corner, in the Courtyard Garden here now, in our Gardens of New Beginning, and they are all doing so well. They do like to be in places actually where it's shady with dappled light. I do have a few of mine where they're getting a lot of the direct daylight sunlight, and the leaves are a little bit more yellow or browny because it's too harsh, but they are fine. They are coping with it. They've been there for years now and they're adjusting to it. But the ones that are in Joachim's Corner in the shady area are doing much better. And this one is in the shade. It gets the very, very early morning sun, and then it gets the very, very late evening sun coming round from the west side, and that is just keeping this plant very happy. So rhododendrons, if you want winter interest and you want flowers and you want something that grows quite fast and something that you can prune as well, then get yourself rhododendrons. So here you can see more of the open grassy area in our courtyard garden area. And then here the borders flanking the bottom of the stairs of our terrace area. These plants I've had planted in these borders now for at least 3-4 years, and they come back beautifully every year. They get really big. Look how tall they are right now, and they get these hive of beautiful purple flowers on them all season long, from now in the middle of June until the first frost, which is going to be around November time. These will be flowering that whole time from now on. So they give us a lovely carpet of purple at the bottom of our stairs, outside of our crystal cottage, and it looks gorgeous. And I flanked them with some variegated grasses that come up, and they get beautiful stalks on with their seed pods and look absolutely beautiful. And then you can see the beautiful evergreens behind as well here. So I am very happy with these plants. They've got very tall this year, and they've just started to flower out now, so there'll be lots more. The other ones haven't got as many yet, but they really do get a lot. And the honeybees love this plant especially. I've seen them on this plant more than anything else. When these are really full of flowers, there are honeybees here all year long. And we know that we really need to help the honeybees, because the pollinators, we cannot do without them, and they are being reduced so much in the wild that we've got to do everything we can to help these insects for our own future's sake. So, plant plants that flower all season long, plant plants that flower in the early spring, during the summer, and in the autumn. And I also did a video recently where I planted some Daphnia mesoreum, and they flower February, March, and have the most beautiful scent on their flowers. So if there are any insects that are out and about during the winter time, then there's something for them there too. There must be, otherwise the plant wouldn't bother flowering at that time of year. So it's just beautiful. So I just wanted to show these as well. And this is not these plants at their best. As I said, they're just starting to come into flower now. So I just want to give you a quick closer look at these beautiful geraniums. The purple colour is absolutely beautiful. And they really look wonderful in front of our crystal cottage here, flanking the stairs and covering the gap underneath the terrace there. And here you can see more of the Courtyard Garden with a view of the Botanical Garden. Now here I have a lot of my house plants outside at the moment. This is my Alocasia zebrina, and this is my Scindapsus pictus Silvery Ann on the stairs here. And you can see my Ficus elastica robusta here. And on the other side of that I have my Monstera deliciosa, which is producing a new leaf outside and enjoying being outside. It was having a very hard time indoors. But see, there's a lovely baby new leaf coming out here. So I'm very pleased that it's happy being outside in the temperatures that are around 25 to 32 degrees Celsius, depending on the day. Here we have our lovely tall beech tree with a beautiful trunk on it. And then we go round to the northern side of our house, and this area is called Yorkim's Corner. And under this beech tree I have geraniums growing, I have rhododendrons, I had Thuja occidentalis Brabant. I have so many different plants. Here I have a little Hosta's collection starting. I've planted ferns. I have an apple tree under here. I have cherry trees. I have so many different things. There are Spirea bushes coming up, and down here you can see this wonderful Hosta called Hosta Minute Man, which has a lovely white border. I love that. I split the plants I think twice now, and they've come up every year beautiful, and I'm waiting for them to get thicker. But the combination of everything here, there's bamboo under here, there are pine trees. I have a little bit of everything crammed into this corner, which is mostly shaded, but it does get sunshine on it, as you can see here. And look at these lovely hostas. This is a very cozy area of our garden. We have our windows here on the north side of the house that are facing a garden that is full of evergreen plants and also lots of wild plants, and we have a lot of rhododendrons here. All winter long, this area, this view, when we look outside of our window, is green, and it's absolutely beautiful. We really do need the greenness during the 8 months of everything else that is a perennial plant gone for long, long periods, but these give us that pop we need. And what you can see next to me here are a few of the different varieties of hostas I have, and I've decided that this area of Yorkim's Corner is going to become a Hosta Collection garden, so I can keep all my hostas in pots, and they will give us lovely summer interest while they're here. They die back completely for the winter, and then they come back themselves next year, which means I don't have to go in and fuss around replanting my pots with different plants. No, I know these come back every year, and that makes life much easier for me, and they are absolutely beautiful to look at. So I have a few here now. This is going to fill up lots more. So this is a working process here. I also have some black pots next to me here that have ferns in them that I've just potted, and I've pruned them right back to give them a recovery time, but I know next season they are going to come out They are very big, tall, beautiful ferns. They're going to come out and look beautiful. In the front of the frame here, you can see I have some of my house plants outside. I have my Dracaena Sansevieria plants outside, 2 of them here. In the middle is a lovely fuchsia that our neighbour gave to us, I think about 3 years ago now. And it flushes out every single year. And then before the first frost, I go in and prune the whole thing back, take it down in the cellar, and it stays in the cellar until it's warm enough to bring it up, repot it in fresh soil, leave it to bounce back. Now this plant is not even halfway grown out again yet. It will grow out much bigger than this, fill up the whole space and be covered with pink and dark purple flowers. It's going to be beautiful. The actual root ball and stem of this plant, my neighbour told me, is around about 10 years old. So I am so privileged to have been given this beautiful plant. She has others and a much bigger one in her garden that she's been doing this process with for many years now. She said that she bought the plants originally in a supermarket as normal small plants and has just kept the same plants alive for all these years, putting them in the cellar for the dormant period and replanting them in the summer, and they bounce back every year. Beautiful. So here I just want to show you the startup of my Hosta collection, and I'm going to be collecting so many different varieties of Hosta because I just think they're absolutely beautiful perennial plants. They work so well here in Sweden. They like the cooler climate, they like shady positions, but they also like to get dappled light or direct light for a few hours in the day, and they just work so well. And here, some of my rhododendrons are still blooming, which is wonderful, and I have different colours and they bloom at different times, which is really nice. So I get them blooming from May, June, July, really lovely. And down here in the middle, I've also planted a monkey puzzle tree, Araucaria araucana, and it's been in the ground now for 3 years and it is doing absolutely fine. And as things grow, well, it's just a matter of moving other plants or pruning back or cutting down. So we'll see what happens then. Now, last year in 2020, I did a video where I bought this beautiful ceramic pot here and I redid this border here with soil and placed this pot here, and I put a Hosta. It flushed out and looked beautiful, but I decided that I needed a plant with winter interest because we see this pot all winter long, as well as the rest of the backdrop in our botanical garden here. So I decided to take out the Hosta, move it into our courtyard garden, and for now I've planted in this rhododendron here that gives us lovely white flowers, and it's flushed out double as much this year. It was a plant that was here that when we moved here, and this part fell off or broke off the main mother plant, which is much bigger now. So I stuck this in the ground in the wild orchard garden, and it flushed out and started growing, and it became a plant of its own right, and it's doing wonderful now. But I do want something that is much taller here, so I'm going to be switching this up and putting something else, another evergreen plant that will be much taller in this pot for the winter this year. But for now, this looks beautiful in this pot. And around the edge, I planted hostas, where I bought one big pot of hosta, and I also went in and sawed all of that up into different pieces, and I did a video on that to show you that you don't have to fuss about washing all the roots and pulling them apart like that and being careful so much. Yes, that is a wonderful way to do it, and of course the best way, but you can just go in and saw them up because every leaf is a new plant basically on this plant. So as long as you have a part of the rhizome and roots, you are going to be able to plant that part of the plant and it will bounce back. All of these bounce back this year. I've been in and tried to split them up a little bit more, so they're a little bit droopy and upset at the moment, but they are doing okay. So I'm going to leave these and see what they're going to be like next season, and if they're not looking so good by next season, then I'm going to pot them up and keep them as part of my Hosta garden in Yorkim's Corner. As I said, my pot garden, they will look beautiful in there. So we'll go further on around here in the Botanical Garden area, and you can see the hostas that I split around the bottom of my ceramic pot, that has been absolutely fine outside all winter. And this lovely boulder that I have flanked with rhododendrons. And I have so many different bushes and shrubs around here. I've made this pathway here on the ground out of these flatter stones as well myself. And you can see there are so many different things in all the borders. And I do try to incorporate something that is evergreen in each border so that during the winter months, when most of it fades back, we will still have something green to look at in each border. Look at this lovely wild plant that came into the border that I've left. It's absolutely gorgeous. So if there's one plant I absolutely love here in my garden, it's a plant that grows out and about everywhere in nature here in Sweden, and especially where I live, along any kind of area that has a stream or a lake, or anywhere that is in the forest under the canopy, but where it's not too dry, a little bit moist, but they can take drying out as well, are these beautiful plants you can see cascading up around me, behind me here. These beautiful, huge ferns are amazing. And the wonderful thing about these plants is they grow in bunches, and you can go in and saw through that bunch and spread it out to get a thicker mass like this. Now, I'm sure behind me here I only had 3 bunches of fern that I went in and literally sawed up into different pieces and spread out along. And over the last 3 years, they have grown out bigger and bigger every year. And they've pupped out, of course, and produced more leaves. And oh, the effect is just gorgeous. I can't get enough of this plant. I have planted fern in different areas all around my garden. They're natural, they come from here, they are something that can look beautiful, can be mixed with other plants, you can have it in the shade, they can take sun as well, but not bright burning direct sun all day long, but they can take longer periods of sunlight. And they give you interest all the way up to the first frost, and it's absolutely beautiful when they come out. And when these die back, I have a lot of evergreen bushes behind me here, and boxwoods, and Norway Spruce, and junipers, and all sorts of different things. So I have a lot of winter interest when all the ferns die back, but they give this lovely, wild, natural effect. And my garden, being a country garden, I really want to keep this wild effect, and this does it for me. They're just gorgeous. So here you get a much closer look at these beautiful ferns that are cascading all around the evergreen plants in and amongst them. So all year this border has different character, and it looks absolutely wonderful in the winter because we have very many evergreen plants. We have boxes in here, we have Norway Spruce, we have junipers. I think I have a variegated, yes, I have a variegated rhododendron in the middle still. So there's so many different plants to look at all year. And then when the ferns come out and fill it all up in the summer, it's just gorgeous. So here you can see all of this corner again. And we just walked through some of the pathways that I've made around the back of the borders. So I've made all these borders so that one can go all the way around them and look at them from all the different sides. And there are the apple trees in the middle. And then here, this was going to be a pathway, but the hydrangea arborescens Annabelle has just taken over, and I think it looks nice with that little tunnel. So here you get another pan around of the Botanical Garden. And look at these wonderful loose strife with their gorgeous yellow flowers all over them at the moment. This border's been difficult for me. I need to amend the soil and find things that can take being in a bright sunny position, and I found that these loose strife are very good for that. And at the back there are Canadian goldenrod that come up and fill out with beautiful yellow flowers as well. that were self-seeded in the garden. I left them when we bought the cottage 6 years ago, and they come up every year. And here you can see the wonderful Weigela with these lovely red flowers that are coming out all over, and then this magnolia, and then all the bushes in front of our annex and our crystal cottage here. This is all still part of the botanical garden. Our pond, little pond area, and then behind the evergreen border here you can see the hammock in Mariana's Corner. So this is still another little pathway in the botanical garden area, and here I have a few more geraniums. So this is the part of the garden we call Mariana's Corner, and it consists of this border I have down here, which is full of a lot of different succulent plants. And this area has a beautiful canopy of our aspen trees and our downy birch trees, flanked with all the evergreen trees around the edge. It's absolutely wonderful to lay back here in a hammock and enjoy the views of the garden. So the first view here is down towards the west side garden area, and I've created a few borders around in this Mariana's Corner area. It's such a lovely place to sit because it's kind of elevated so that you can see down into the botanical garden, west side garden, and see through all the different plants and borders in this area. Very nice. Now, did I forget to mention how important it is to have different areas to sit in or laying in your garden? This garden has a lovely canopy over us so that you can lay here all day actually into the evening, and the breeze comes in from the neighbouring field. The sun is going down to the west and it's gorgeous just laying here, being able to look out over everything. I have the botanical garden over to the side here where I can look at everything there. It's gorgeous. I have west side garden in front of me, and I have the lovely borders here in Mariana's Corner. Oh, this is just amazing. So we'll carry on here, and this pathway is in the west side garden area, and I created a pathway in the middle of this huge border that I had here before because I couldn't really get into it, and it creates more interest in the garden if you can get in and go through and walk around different borders to feel like you really get in amongst the plants and feel immersed in them. So this alley here I have at the back is flanked with Norway spruce on both sides and goes up and out to our country road outside. Here we have our largest hazelnut bush in the garden at the moment, 10 metres tall. It's absolutely beautiful with thick stems. But look at these Norway spruce and the feeling they give as they grow up like an alleyway here in our west side garden. It's just wonderful, and they grow so fast and they are green all year, so it's just perfect. Something that I think is really important in a garden is lots of different seating areas so that you can sit and appreciate every part of your garden. So you don't have to just wander around and back and it's over and you can't really take in things. It's nice to have different areas to sit at different times, to take in all the details and appreciate everything. Now at the moment I am sitting in West Side Garden, and we have this table here with 4 chairs, this white table. Very often we sit here in the morning and have breakfast, or we sit on the bench as you can see over there, which is surrounded by these beautiful hydrangea arborescens Annabelle, and there are different plants that are growing around the edge here. I did have a lot of lupins coming up here, and I've just pruned them all the way down today because they were all tired and finished with flowering and starting to produce seeds, which I don't want, so that they don't spread around in the garden. They've been pruned down to become a lovely mulch for the bushes that are coming up in these beds here now. But the sun here comes up from east round to the south and down in the west, and that is why the sun is behind us here, and that is why this garden is called West Side Garden. It's in the furthest west corner of the garden areas we have. And once again here is wonderful because we can see out over the neighbouring fields, and I can sit and I can see up into the botanical garden and enjoy the canopy of the trees around here. At the back here there are a lot of Norway spruce that have been planted, and they are growing up beautifully here. They are evergreen, so we have a lovely evergreen backdrop all the way around the west side of our garden as well. Now I have to be careful in this west side area because we have our lovely breakfast table, as I said, here, and well, I want to work on the border that is flanking our garden and the neighbouring field, but I don't want to plant too much so that we won't be able to see over the field, because it's absolutely beautiful. It's like extra borrowed landscape. It feels like our garden if we can look through there, and it just gives us this wonderful expanse. Now you can see I have these borders here that I need to fill out with some wonderful perennials. I'm still trying to decide what I want to fill them out with. And then up here I have a bench, and I've just cut back all the lupins that were growing around it, but at the back there's still the hydrangea growing up wonderfully. So look at this beautiful border, absolutely full of flowers here in our west side garden. And this was an experiment for me. I didn't know what I wanted to put in here, so I decided to move these lovely white flowering evergreen plants down here at the bottom that fill out around the edge. Absolutely beautiful. I come in once a year and clip them back, and then all the clippings can be planted somewhere else and they will just flush out. As long as the soil is moist, they will keep coming back. So that is absolutely wonderful. And then I put all these lovely orange flowering plants here in the middle that come up higher behind the white flowers and give a beautiful cascade of colour from the orange to the white. They contrast absolutely beautiful together, and together with all the rocks in this border, it's a lovely harmonious feeling. I absolutely love this. I can't get enough of perennial plants that I know that once I've planted them, they are going to bounce back every year and produce flushes of flowers and foliage like on these plants with wonderful contrast. And all I have to do is go in and trim around the edge now and again. So here we can see back up into Mariana's Corner here and round to the bench, which I've planted with hydrangea arborescens Annabelle, and I've planted that in a few places in my garden because it works so well, grows so fast, bushes out wonderfully, and has huge lovely white flowers all over. So now we have entered the area of the garden called the inner garden, and it's the inner garden because the Botanical Garden is on this side of us here, and I have planted a hedge of Thea occidentalis Brabant here, and they've done so well for me. I think they've been in the ground here now 4 years, and I bought them as 60 centimetre specimens, and now they are well over 2 meters tall. I mean, they have grown so amazingly in 4 years. So I have an entrance there to the Botanical Garden, and then there's one behind the camera that goes into Westside Garden, and then we have an alleyway that goes down into our island garden as well. This area is just grass at the moment and a border around the edge, as I said, to give a feeling of a cozy inner garden. And we're not really sure what's going to be happening with this garden area. We would love to have a 15 square meter greenhouse here so that we can sit and enjoy the seasons for much longer periods, and also produce some vegetables, and I can do things with seeds and so forth, because even though I have all this lovely garden space, I don't have anywhere to propagate seeds and so forth at the moment. I don't have any greenhouse, so this area is being kept open for that reason, and we're waiting until the time is right, because we would love a lovely greenhouse that has a wall around it, and a really good quality one where it's also like an orangerie, so that we can really enjoy sitting out here. So for now, this is a lovely green expanse. You can see the annex behind me here. You can see our crystal cottage over on the other side there. And in this area, we have been fighting with Japanese knotweed since day one. This whole area behind me, literally up to this table and all along that side, was 3 meter high Japanese knotweed when I bought this cottage 6 years ago. So we've been fighting to get the Japanese knotweed as far back and out of the garden as possible, and it is working, but it's taking all these years. If we don't clip the grass here, the Japanese knotweed will still come up in different areas in the grass everywhere. It is one of those plants that once it's in, it's very difficult, nearly impossible to get rid of completely. So I would just like to put a word of warning out there. I'm going to show you some big plants of Japanese knotweed that we have growing here as an example of how it was in this whole area, to show you what they look like. Beautiful plants, beautiful to look at, beautiful stems, they're edible, taste like rhubarb, you can make beautiful pies out of them in the early spring. Never plant this plant because you will never be able to get rid of it if you do. And in fact, I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see just how large this Japanese knotweed is behind me. So here it is, just so you can see what Japanese knotweed looks like and how big it can get in your garden. I am approximately 1 meter 65 centimeters. This Japanese knotweed is 3 meters tall and a huge bush, and it is in this area and a little bit around the corner here in another bush that we have. And you can see we've pushed it back, the grass has grown out here, and there is a wooden border around the edge where this Japanese knotweed is allowed to grow out for now. As I said, this is an area of the garden where we really don't know what we're doing yet. So it's actually nice as a backdrop, as a huge bush cover for the summertime for now. And it does stay within this area. As I said, if you clip your grass or you trim the area, they will stay down. But the moment you're not there, 2 weeks later, they will be coming up again. So you have to keep on top of it all the time. We've been in trying to pull up roots and so forth. You have to be careful that you don't start spreading the plant even more when you do that. And when you trim the pieces that fly around everywhere, if the ground stays moist, they will propagate and germinate, and every part of the plant can reproduce a new plant. The leaves, the stems, the side shoots, the trunk, everything. So do not plant this plant. Seriously, you will never get rid of it. As I said, we've had this cottage 6 years. We've not managed to get rid of this plant. I absolutely love the look of it. It's got this little space now in the corner of our garden, far away from everything else. It hasn't spread to anywhere else in our garden except this area where it was originally. Nowhere else. So we're not that worried. We just would like to, with time, probably eliminate it as much as possible. But for now, well, I just enjoy this little piece. But it's not a recommendation. That is the dreaded Japanese knotweed, which I know is illegal to plant or do anything with in the United Kingdom and many other places. And it is on every website, any gardening program. Everyone will tell you about this frightening plant that can grow up through concrete, that can grow up through wooden floors in your house and so forth. Now, this plant is not that strong. It will only ever do that if there's a crack already in the concrete or in the wood, and the wooden house is very old, for example, or the concrete house is mouldy or moist, damp, or something that has caused it to be loose so that the plant can get through it. But this plant is a survivor, so all it means is it will grow in any situation. One thing about this plant though is it is a tropical kind of plant. So the minute there's the slightest sign of frost, the whole plant dies back. It's gone. It cannot survive frost at all. But it can survive open areas with bright sun. It can survive dappled shade and being in the shade, but it will grow a little bit less. But you will find it on the edges of forests and so forth. But it's usually along roadways or open fields where it's maybe closer to water as well, and then it will grow and you will never be able to stop it. But here, never gets any water, bright sun, south-facing sun all day to the west, and this plant is 3 meters tall and loving it. So this is part of our inner garden at the moment, and as I said, with time it will all be gone probably. So I just wanted to share that. If you're ever getting rid of this plant, just remember, if whatever you take up, put it into a brown sack and it has to be burnt. Don't throw it in any rubbish, don't throw it in any compost, because the plants will germinate. You have to burn every piece of the plant if you move it anywhere else. Remember that. So just to give you a quick pan around of the inner garden area, this lovely pine tree that I planted 2 years ago, and it's grown 1 meter since then. And then you can see that I have put a wooden border around where the Japanese knotweed is growing and made a gap between it and the Thuja occidentalis Brabant that's growing at the back that were becoming stunted due to this plant affecting it underground in the root system with its chemical warfare. But look at these gorgeous stems on this plant. I mean, it is absolutely beautiful, but it's just so highly invasive that it is not something that you would ever want to intentionally plant in your garden. But here it does give us a beautiful hedge on the side of the garden and a kind of exotic feel. So this is open and green for now, and there are going to be lots of changes probably in this area in the future. And I really can't wait till the day that, for example, this table will be inside a beautiful greenhouse. So now we've just walked back into the Botanical Garden area where you can see the pond, and you saw another table and chair set we have here with the hydrangeas around it, our crystal cottage there at the back, and then the view of the Courtyard Garden area, and then back into the inner garden. And it has a very cozy feeling in this area. I think I really do want to let the evergreen bushes grow up to around 3 meters tall, so it feels very cozy and secluded in here all the time. This is a lovely rowan tree I have growing in the corner here with a beautiful trunk. And these are cherry laurel bushes that I moved from Cozy Cove where they were too exposed in the sunshine. Now they're in a shady spot. They are looking absolutely wonderful, flushing out new leaves and looking very happy. So let's continue the tour now. So now we are in the area of our garden called Island Garden, and this is the area behind our annex. This area, when I bought the cottage, was completely overgrown. You couldn't get behind the annex, and it was full of Japanese knotweed right round to here. That has all gone now, and it's called Island Garden. As you can see, there is an island in the middle of this garden here, full of mature trees, and I love all the tree trunks in here. It looks absolutely beautiful. And then at the bottom, there's a lot of wild plants that are allowed to just grow whatever comes into the border to fill out the greenness in the middle. So all we do is come and trim a pathway around both sides of this island here. I have my area over here where I throw all the debris from the garden until we go and burn them off in Bonfire Garden. But it's just wonderful to be able to come back here and appreciate all these wonderful canopies of all these different trees again, and then go for a walk around the island. And we even have a bench here so you can sit and look out over the neighbouring field. So most of the trees in the centre here are downy birch and goat willow, and there's also aspen in here, and then there are some shrubs in the middle and a lot of ground elder. But in this situation, the ground elder is absolutely perfect because this is a wild border. None of these trees or anything have been planted by anyone. They are self-seeded, all of them. So it's a great combination together, and because there's a border all the way around, well, it doesn't matter that the ground elder is allowed to grow out here. And here we've put a feature in with a bench and some pots, and I have a plastic bucket here collecting rainwater, which I put some water-loving plants in just to make it look a little bit prettier. And we've also made another border in here, but again, this is all about the island in the middle, really, and seeing the wonder of nature and what comes along by itself. So here we'll do a little pan around and move on to the next area in the garden. So now I am sitting in the area of our garden called Cozy Cove, and in this little area we have a view over the neighbouring field, and that just gives us an expand of borrowed landscape. It actually feels like it's our garden. It's absolutely wonderful to sit here and lunch under the canopy of all of these beautiful tall trees we have around us here. A whole plethora of different trees. In front I have some larix trees, and I've planted on both sides here, flanking the Cozy Cove, Thuya bushes to give us evergreen coverage all year round in this area. It's wonderful. I planted a red maple behind over here, and when it's a really hot day, one of the best places to sit in the middle of the day for lunch and so forth is here. It just feels so cozy with the trees above, the bushes around, the field outside. It's wonderful. This just shows how important it is to have mature trees all around in your garden so that you can sit in the shade and enjoy without having to sit in the scorching sun for too long. Now this area of the garden really does have the right name. It is very cozy in here. I have some of these black pots here that I've just recently moved the boxes that were in them out and put some shrubs in. And here you can see one of the larger aspen trees we have in the garden. We have a lot of aspen trees. They look absolutely wonderful. And here I've created some borders that are full of more of the beautiful fern that I love, or bracken we should call them really. They are bracken. There's a pine tree in here as well, Scots pine, and a Japanese maple tree, an Acer here. Beautiful red tone, and I want to get another one of these to put in the border on the other side in here, so it breaks up the green colours a little bit and also accentuates them even more. It's absolutely beautiful. And on the sides there are more Thuya occidentalis Brabant, giving us protection and keeping that cozy feeling, so the more they grow the more it will be beautiful. So I hope all these pots and things are going to flush out lovely here. So now I am in the area of our garden called Bonfire Garden, and well, it's pretty obvious why this garden got that name. I built this outdoor fireplace by pushing all these big rocks out from the Crystal Woods area in the Wild Orchard Garden, years ago now. And every year we have to burn off a lot of wood and overgrown trees and shrubs and plants and all sorts. Twice a year we usually have a big burnout, and then sometimes we can sit here and make a little fireplace and enjoy being out here in the evening, or when we want to grill something. So this area is mainly grass. We have Thuya that I've planted around the edge. We have a beautiful huge hazelnut bush at the back, and on this side in the middle we have our old well that didn't look so nice, so I've just filled this border here with a lot of different shrubs and a Scots pine, and there is also an aspen growing up by itself next to it, so these will go up and give us canopy in the middle of the garden here at some point too. And you can see this bonfire garden, it leads back into the courtyard garden area in front of our crystal cottage. So at the moment this area is in the sun. It's the evening time. It's around about 5 o'clock in the evening. So we have our table here and we can sit here and grill. It's just wonderful. So we can carry on here and see Bonfire Garden from different angles. And this border's coming on really well with these shrubs that I have in the middle here, all sorts of different types. And I want them to, get around maximum 2 meters high. So we feel like the table area here has a green hedge around, kind of. And it's so perfect to have an open area here where we can have the bonfire, because there is an awful lot that needs to be burned off every year. These shrubs and trees and so forth, they grow an awful lot during the summer months. And I have so much I have to prune back and
clip and saw off and so forth all the time. So an open area with grass, and this bonfire is absolutely perfect just here in front of Crystal Cottage. So we'll carry on now into yet another area of the garden, and this is the Garden of New Beginnings, and you can see here the outline of our little heart pond that is going to take some time before we finish it off. But there is a rock border here, and here there are some climbing hydrangeas and all sorts of other stuff, but I need to figure out what I want to put into this border as well to fill it out with something that will kind of flower as well for us.
So this part of our garden here is called the Garden of New Beginnings, and this was completely overgrown just a year ago, and we had to come out here and take out all of the spirea bushes that had grown out of control from the garden that was planted before we moved into the forest area out here. And we decided to take all that out, and we dug up as many of the roots as we could ourselves, and we've kept this area trimmed, and that has kept everything at bay. So now we have another open area here, which is also shaded because we have the canopy of many beautiful trees, and here it includes a lot of lovely oak trees. And one of my main reasons for wanting to extend out into this area of the garden, which in the beginning was the Wild Orchard Garden, which is behind the camera, and then nothing here, I wanted to extend out so that we would be able to have as the main focal point of this garden the biggest tree of our garden, and that is the grand old oak at the back. You can see there, and at the moment you can only see the trunk because it is so big. It's 25 going on 30 meters tall. It's a huge tree, and I wanted us to be able to see that all the time from top to bottom, because why wouldn't you want to display a majestic tree like this? So when they came and put in our water a year ago, we also had a lot of stones that came up out of the ground, and I told them to please put them in 3 different piles so that I will be able to build around them and make some rockery gardens. So on this side of the frame, I will show you later, there is a rockery. There is one in the middle here, and there I've planted Hydrangea macrophylla, and I've also planted peniculated hydrangea, as well as many other bushes and rhododendrons. And this garden, again, I've used the things that were already in the garden to kind of shape it, and that means on this side of the garden, you'll see in a moment, the big boulder in the ground, which has become a rockery garden, and then flanking the whole edge of that side of the garden are hazelnut bushes that I have trimmed all the way down so they've become large bushes, but they were all mature 10-meter tall hazelnut bushes that were taking over the whole of the forest area so that the trees couldn't grow and expand. So I've cut these down so they become lovely, beautiful bushes in their own rights, and they give a nice outline to the garden. And this area of the garden leads into a whole new area that me and my husband have only just started on. We've cleared out now and created the pathways, and it's an area we call Silver Way. And that is due to the lovely shimmering silver colour on the oak tree, as well as in the middle of the pathway there is a beautiful downy birch, and it is gorgeous. So even here you can sit down and relax in a chair. And still get the evening sun on your face as it fades down to the west.
I really do love that this garden area has these mature trees, and I really love English oak trees, so I'm so happy that there are a few different ones here, different sizes now in the Garden of New Beginnings, also in Silver Way and also in Crystal Woods. So we have them in a few different areas of the garden. And this is another one of the borders I made out of the rocks that were piled together, and they're coming on really well. So I'm very pleased with all of this.
So now we've made it into the area of our garden called Silver Way, the whole new area we've only just started on, cleared out a lot of the trees we had to cut back A lot of the hazelnut bushes we've had to cut back, exposing these beautiful rocks around and about, clear the ground out and line out where we want the borders to be. And this is also called Silver Way. As you can see, the beautiful downy birch in the middle of the pathway in front of us here. Absolutely beautiful. The largest one we have here, that is also 20 plus meters tall. Absolutely gorgeous. And this is the pathway that leads into Crystal Woods. So this is a work in process, as I said. The hazelnut bushes need to fill out after being pruned back. They were right up in this space in the canopy here. Now they're down here so that we can have them as large bushes. And there will also be hazelnut bushes growing out on the side over here as well. And we have a couple of downy birch trees on the ground that need to be cut back and moved out of the pathway. This area will also be filled out with Norway Spruce and maybe some Rhododendron and so forth to fill out and give us an evergreen backdrop in here. So this all becomes a lovely enclosed silver way with time, feeling like you're kind of going into a forest walkway but not overgrown.
So now that we've exposed the ground here, I really love when I expose these beautiful big boulders that are just lying in the ground everywhere. At the moment, we're looking back at the Garden of New Beginnings, and I did throw grass seeds out here just to give a thin layer of grass in here, and whether it grows out or not that much doesn't matter, but I'm sure it will get better with time. But as I said, there are a lot of trees here, a lot of canopy, and they absorb all of the water that's in the ground. So it's a bit difficult for grass and so forth to grow in the ground just underneath them here. But a thin dusting of grass underneath the trees here would be really nice. And it is growing because I have been in a couple of times and trimmed the area. So back to our Silver Way. And you can see here the largest tree of the garden, as I mentioned before, our beautiful big oak tree. And then another rockery here that I'm going to be making into a lovely hosta garden with time. I can't wait to get on with that project. It's going to be perfect for the hostas in a raised bed with rocks around where it's going to be very difficult for any slugs and things like that and deer to get in and eat them. So I won't have to worry about them so much up there. But look at these lovely boulders and look how nice it is when you can put some figures around in the garden. Look at this peekaboo boy, as I call him. And some moss on some of the boulders that I've left. But in the middle is this lovely downy birch with its beautiful silver trunk, and it's very tall, 20 to 25 meters. Lovely. And I've created the pathway, as I said, so you can go around both sides. So it really is a focal part of the pathway into Crystal Woods. It's such a great new development in the garden. So our chainsaw broke, so we couldn't complete the project with getting all of the larger trees that had fallen down in the area. There are some downy birch you can see on the ground here. I need to get in and get a chainsaw to make us some logs for the winter burning. Look at this lovely boulder on the side here next to this hazelnut bush. But when this area here fills out along the edges of the pathway, it really will feel like a lovely alleyway into Crystal Woods. But being able to use all of the old wood to line the edge of the pathway is perfect. So we can see where plants are allowed to grow and aren't. And also the wood is very good for all the insects in this woodland area. And at the end of the pathway here, you can see this lovely maple tree here. This is a Norway maple, which is indigenous to Sweden. And this example is 20-25 meters tall.
So now we've made it into the area of our garden called Crystal Woods. And this is the area of the garden that we want to keep as natural as possible. And that means we've created pathways so that we can, of course, go in and walk around and enjoy the garden. And we want to keep it such that we only walk in on the pathways to allow all the natural plants that want to grow in this area, in this habitat, to grow out with as little disturbance as possible. So the area in the middle you see here behind me has some very mature Norway spruce in the middle. It had a few hazelnut bushes that have all been clipped back to keep them as mounding bushes with time, to give space for the trees to grow up and grow out their canopies, because this area is all about the trees. We have more of the downy birch here in the middle as well, and there are rowan trees, aspen trees, ash trees. We have a little bit of everything. The Norway maple. It really is a beautiful area. To think this is part of our garden, and it's really important to make sure that we keep as many mature trees up, giving shade, giving habitat for all sorts of creatures. So this area is just wonderful for that. It's so nice to be able to walk around a garden and feel so many different and diverse areas all in one space. This is just amazing for me.
So we'll just go for a little wander around the pathways here in Crystal Woods. You can see Crystal Cottage there. And I come in here actually with the rake and keep these pathways clean. And this pathway you can see here goes back into the Garden of New Beginnings. And as we turn around, we have a lovely boulder here on the edge of the pathway that leads back deeper into the Crystal Woods area. And here, another beautiful oak tree. And on the left of this pathway, everything is going to be allowed to grow up and bush out, but not the hazelnut bush, so that it grows up to 8, 9, 10 meters tall again and fills out the whole area and stops any of the younger trees coming up, because I would like this to be full of trees that have one trunk and not more like a huge shrub. So all this central area you see here will be growing out, and I've planted more Norway spruce in here, so we have an evergreen area as well. And you can see here, these are the larger evergreens and other varieties of trees we have in here. Rowan trees, Norway maple, as I said, Norway spruce, aspen. So many different types of trees in our woodland area. You can see to the right here, all of the stems and trunks and so forth we've cleared out from Silver Way. And this is one of those larger hazelnut bushes I've had to cut back, and you can see the other hazelnuts I've cut back here, but they are all going to grow up again, and I can keep them as lovely, maybe 2 meter high bushes in the middle of all the trees.
So now I'm sitting in another beautiful little area of its own right. This is in the heart of our Crystal Woods, an area I like to call the Japanese stone garden. And this area, I mean the whole woodland area here, is full of rocks, boulders, stones, whatever you want to call them. And this area here, I've decided to clear the rocks out as much as possible. I come in and I brush them off. I keep them clear because I want to have a little area where we can appreciate the rocks as they are. Now, I haven't been in for a while now and sweep off and clean these rocks. As you can see, I've just left them. I haven't had time. I've had the rest of the garden to sort out. But this area I've also opened out so that there aren't a mass of plants around the bottom area. As I said, I want to keep this clear so that one gets to concentrate on the rocks and all of the trunks of the beautiful mature trees that are growing up around, as you can see here. The only plants I've left and allowed to grow up in between here are some of the beautiful ferns. As you know, I love them. So when they pop up around and about naturally here, I let those stay there because they don't get too big and they just match with the rocks, I think. But these do get moss on them, and the moss becomes a bright green colour when it's the rainy seasons, in the autumn or in the early spring season. very nice, and then as it dries out during the summer they become more brown. But they are under the canopy here so they can keep the moisture longer. But this is just a lovely little area. I would just like to have a couple of figures in this area at some point to give a tranquil feeling of sitting in a real Japanese stone garden. Just another garden in a garden, this lovely Japanese stone garden in the middle of our crystal woods.
Oh, how I love, love, love these granite boulders here. And look how beautifully the fern, when they come up, contrast against these lovely boulders that have a thin dusting of moss on them as well. And then the root systems of some of these trees in between. And this broken big boulder here. How wonderful that looks, how it's naturally just split open. And another wonderful thing about these boulders is the harmony they give, the peace, and also seeing the quartz crystal streaks in them. That always just amazes me. It always makes me wonder what could actually be inside some of these if they actually got cracked open, if there would be a cave of beautiful crystals. Now look at this wonderful tree here. This is a black elder, and it is the only one we have in the garden that is of this size. It's 20 plus meters tall as well. And it's surrounded by all of these wonderful boulders around, as you can see here. Just gorgeous. And look, this is what I was talking about. A huge streak of quartz crystal in this boulder. And it's like layers of the boulders peel away and fall off and expose these lovely large streaks of quartz. It's just amazing. And then look at the beautiful roots on this black elder hugging that boulder on the ground. Amazing. Here, some more hazelnut bushes, as well as lots of other things going on in here. And this wonderfully, naturally wonky growing trunk here on this rowan tree amazes me every time I walk past it on the pathway. So we carry on, and as you can see, there are some old tree trunks here from very old trees that had rotted, and these stumps are giving life to animals. There's a big hole in the side of this one because it housed a rabbit warren for the longest time, but I haven't seen rabbits for a very long time in here now. When I first bought the cottage 6 years ago, it was overrun with rabbits, but that's because the whole garden was completely wild. And now, well, the last 3 years I've probably only seen 2 or 3 rabbits in this area, so they've probably moved deeper into the woods. But look at all these lovely ferns growing up along the edge of the pathway on the ground here. That's exactly what I want to see. And we tread on the ground outside of these linings I've made as little as possible to disturb all the plants that come. And look at the ground covering that grows if you don't go in and disturb or walk on it. It's just beautiful. That all of this just designs itself into a beautiful crystal woods area. And as we go up here, you can see the largest Norway spruce trees we have in the garden, and then the pathway that continues back into the back part of the wild orchard garden here. And this is a big boulder that has a kind of ecosystem of blueberries growing on it. That's quite amazing. I do love all the different types of gardens we have here.
So now we are in the area of our garden called the Wild Orchard Garden. And this area has 2 pathways that join and go round in a ring, and they lead out towards Crystal Woods, the Garden of New Beginnings, and out into Cozy Cove and another area there. So the idea with this area was that there is an electric wire that goes across the top of our garden part here with a wooden pole structure there and out at the other end, so the trees aren't allowed to grow up and into the electric wire here. So this area, I go in every autumn and winter, and prune every single thing down in this area to 2.5 to 3 meters high, so that we get this feeling of walking through a lovely green alleyway. And at the same time, I keep control of these shrubs and trees so that they don't grow up into the forest area like Crystal Woods. But this in its own right is a beautiful habitat full of wild plants. There's nothing here that's been planted by me or anybody else. Everything here is wild. There are so many different plants. They merge and work so well together. This is a beautiful habitat for animals. They don't get disturbed in amongst the plants that are growing here. There are lots of rocks. There's so much going on. There are even fallen trees and so forth. And all these things are good for beetles and the ants. We have lots of big ants that go along, and they live very well in the pathways of this area. So you have to be careful about standing in one place too long, because there could be lots of big ants that crawl up your legs and they bite and hurt. But they're all welcome in this garden, the Wild Orchard Garden. The name Wild Orchard Garden came about because when I first bought the cottage, I actually was going to plant lots of fruit trees in just this area. And I planted some plum trees and pear trees and so forth, but it didn't really work out for me that way because this area was so wild and it kept overgrowing. So I decided to move all of those trees to the Botanical Garden area and West Side Garden and so forth, where they can get more sun and they can be in the controlled environments. Here, the only control I do is prune back all the plants so that they don't encroach on the pathway. I trim the pathways because now the pathways have filled themselves with grass by themselves. And I trim the tops, as I say, every autumn to keep this at 3 meters high, and I've got this lovely wall canopy of pathways. It's absolutely wonderful. And in here I have a couple of lovely big rocks full of quartz crystal streaks, and they look gorgeous. I have my Buddha figure sitting on a rock, and you will see that as we go around. So, again, we start here in the back pathway into the Wild Orchard Garden, and this leads into a forest pathway around the back of Cozy Cove as well. But here you can see the fork where there are two pathways, one to the left and one to the right. We'll take the one to the left, and this carries on and leads back into the Bonfire Garden. And on the right in a moment here, you will see where we will have our pond, our little heart pond in the Garden of New Beginnings. So now, again, you can see here where the pond will be and where I've pruned these hazelnut bushes so they don't get too tall. And there's an area there behind Bonfire Garden that hasn't been named yet because I trim it, keep it clear, but I haven't done anything with that area yet, so it'll be interesting to see what that's going to become. So now we're back into the Garden of New Beginnings, and we'll go round past this rock garden here with the climbing hydrangea that I've planted in it, which seems to be happy there, and then the pathway into Crystal Woods, this lovely big bushy hazelnut bush. Next to that there are aspen trees growing up. But in the pathways of the Wild Orchard Garden on both sides, I have a lot of rowan trees coming up and a lot of aspen trees. And you can see this trunk on the floor is an old oak tree that fell down approximately 3 years after I bought the cottage, and the insects are loving it right now. So yes, as I was saying, on the pathways here, on the sides, there are rocks with quartz streaks in them, as you can see in this one. Absolutely beautiful. Rowan trees, aspen trees, mostly on both sides that I keep trimmed at the 2.5–3 meter height, so they're becoming bushes and gives this lovely effect of an alleyway. And I think it's so interesting that all of this is filled out with grass on the ground on its own. And then this lovely big boulder here on the side here with our Buddha figure on it and the crystal, the quartz streaks running up and down it. An absolutely beautiful combination, and you can see the ferns, these large ferns on the ground behind, and then the rowan trees that are coming up as a bush as well behind them.
a beautiful combination together of plants that just come into this area naturally on their own, place themselves wherever they want to be, and it works out so wonderfully. I couldn't be more pleased that those ferns have come up behind that boulder there. It's absolutely wonderful. And yes, it might be the wild orchard garden, but it does have to be kept clear in the pathways because of course everything would just grow back and grow over and you would never be able to get into the area. So now we're carrying on the pathway behind the area that hasn't got a name yet and Cozy Cove, but on the left side of this pathway, I call it the Garden of Regeneration, because plants that aren't doing so well or evergreens that aren't doing so well, I usually plant into the side there and give them a second chance. Some of them do well. But this view is the view of the area called Cozy Cove, and here again, lots of ferns, and you can see now the Japanese Acer from behind and how well that's doing. And then we carry on more here. I've just planted out a lot of ferns in the border you just saw there on the right, so they will bush out and be beautiful next year. And you can see the whole Cozy Cove area here from the back. And where I have the ferns here, I have a Scots pine as well as the Acer. And then the backdrop, the Thuja occidentalis Brabant, and it's all doing so well together. And the canopy of these lovely tall mature trees around in this area is gorgeous. A lovely place to sit and look over the neighbouring field, which gives this extension out, and then look at this beautiful aspen tree. I mean, this tree, or these trees I should say, a combination together are like 25 metres tall. And then we go round and we carry on into the other side of Island Garden, and you can see there's a border on the right hand side here that needs to be worked out as well and planted with, I think, more evergreen plants and so forth. And this area for sitting and as a garden feature, so that one can come in, see over the neighbouring field and enjoy the island garden with all the mature tree trunks. And then as we carry on back out into Bonfire Garden here, you can see that it opens out more and then back into the Courtyard Garden.
So here we are in the Botanical Garden, which is a big area full of plants that I've bought when I've been out raiding the rack, whenever I see a good deal or a beautiful plant that I want to put somewhere where I can appreciate it, I put it in this area of the garden. This is a much more well-kept area of the garden, and you've seen round and about in the garden all the different designs. But again, the most important feature is sitting areas, laying areas, relaxing areas, because you need to have time to appreciate everything and not just race around all the time. And for me, my husband's always saying to me, take time to actually sit and relax, because most of the time I have something to do. There is always something to do in this garden. So I do a lot of things for hours on end, and then I'll have a break for lunch and I'll sit somewhere in the garden. And then when I've tired myself out completely in the evening, then I'll sit somewhere in the garden as well. And we usually have breakfast, as I said, in the garden. And then sometimes I just want to time out and I go for a wander around my garden, because this garden, the whole thing, is like a park. To me, it's like my own national park. Because it has everything for every being. Just sitting back and seeing what one has created. Ah, it's wonderful. I would like to mention that having the luxury of having so many rocks in our garden to use to create all these beautiful plant borders is amazing, but they are also very important. They give so much energy to the garden. Just looking at them, I just feel so relaxed. And I know that they absorb heat and give heat to the borders, and I know they insulate the borders, and I know that they keep moisture in the soil. And I know that they give habitats for plants to live under or in between. So they have so many functions. So you cannot underestimate the importance of rocks everywhere in your garden if you want to make a lovely, natural looking and make lots of habitats for everything to be able to thrive at its best. And here they are full of quartz crystal and all sorts. Most of them are granite stones. I can't get enough of them. They mean as much to me as all of the plants and the nature.
So here we'll go around and look at some of the borders I have. This one with the Norway Spruce in the middle and underplanted. And another border here. And this little ball here is a Norway Spruce as well that I've been pruning every year to keep it as a little ball. And that's something you can do with some of your plants, your shrubs and your trees. You can change the shape and keep them at certain heights, but it just means a lot of pruning and a lot of control, because otherwise they will grow out much faster with many more stems if you don't keep on top of them.
Now, I don't know about you, but I do love loose strife in the garden. These beautiful yellow flowers behind me here, they come out and they fill out these borders wonderfully, and they spread very well for you. So make sure that you don't put them anywhere amongst lots of other plants where you don't want them to spread with their rhizomes, because they spread very easily. But I have them in a little border here that has a rockery of stones around the edge, and they cannot spread beyond that area. So they are spreading around the edge of the boulder that I have in this border here, and they look beautiful there.
So we'll have a closer look at the loose strife here around this border, and in the background with the hammer you can see Mariana's Corner. I just love the yellow of these flowers. I think yellow flowers are just so striking in the garden, and they can be mixed with various different colours if you wish to. They go well with orange and blue, purple. They're very, very nice. And here I have an arrangement of apple trees, and then behind that, one of my park benches in the shade under the canopy of all the taller aspen trees behind, and the apple trees and so forth here. And then behind that bench is a back alley where I've planted these bamboo bushes that will grow up to about 3 meters high. And now we are off and into the area called Mariana's Corner again. And this area is just so nice. It's so breezy. You get a lovely summer breeze. You can see the whole garden, as I mentioned before. It's just so relaxing, a little bit more elevated. And then again back into this pathway in the bigger border of the west side garden, full of lots of evergreen plants, and stays mostly green all year round. I have a border I want to put under the Norway Spruce there. We have our white table and some borders that I've been working on here. And then we'll carry on up here and to the right, back into another view of the Botanical Garden area with our crystal cottage behind, and a few of these stone pathways I've made in between the borders to separate them and give some areas of interest. As I said, being able to go in and amongst the borders gives a really nice feeling, gives some excitement as well. And now we're back into the Courtyard Garden area, an open area of grass, and the borders around at the bottom of our terrace and our cottage, and with an amazing view of the Botanical Garden and round to our annex, and these new borders I've just made in front that are getting the evening sun on them now. So as I said, early morning, the sun comes around from the east and I'll get a slight touch of sunshine directly. Then the rest of the day they are in the shade, and then around about 5 o'clock in the evening they'll get a maximum of probably 20 minutes direct evening sunshine.
So just to give you some perspective on our pond project here, this is a little pond here, or I should say a plastic bucket that we've put into the ground. It's about 40 centimeters deep, stones around the edge. We've put some grass seed around and we're waiting for it to grow back. I had this lovely rock moved here when we started to excavate our large ponds that we still haven't done anything with yet, but we will do eventually. This rock was in the middle of that hole, and now it's here as a beautiful focal piece in the middle of our botanical garden area. So I really love that. Planted out some of these lovely fern plants, and I have these water plants in here, and the wildlife is already crawling around. I see lots of spiders, I see flies of different types on the plants. We do have frogs and toads in the garden, so I'm sure they will enjoy this at some point too. If you haven't been back and seen that video and how we did this, then remember to go and see that as well.
It always just seems so important to have elements of water in your garden, elements of rocks mixed in with your plants, and some ornaments.
So I did a video not long ago where I went in and rearranged this whole border by me here, and I planted these lovely Weigela bushes, and these are the red Prince variety, and they are starting to flush out with red flowers all over them, and I am so pleased about this. I planted a Magnolia tree behind here, and this will get lovely deep purple flowers on it. That is flushing out really well as well. I've put another bush as a cutting in the middle of this here that has red leaves on it, and it's from one of my larger bushes over there. I'll show you that later. To fill out, I have geraniums down here at the bottom, and all the rocks and everything is just looking wonderful. So this was a success story, and I just wanted to show you that. Go back and see the video of how I rearranged it so you can see how it looked in the beginning when I was working on this in May 2021.
So another quick pan around here of the botanical garden area.
So down in this border behind me here, I have a lovely bunch of Heuchera, and these are Heuchera Paris, and they get these lovely pink flowers on them, these tall stalks. I think I actually originally had around 8 pots of this plant that I bought while I was out raiding the rack. I got them at a bargain price that was amazing. And since then, I've been in and I've split each pot up into individual plants. Now, I did this last year. I think I did it late summer, actually, into the autumn. And I spread them out in this whole border because I had them just around the edge, but I wanted them growing in underneath these holly bushes and this red dogwood here. And they are so easy to go in on the mother plant and just rip bits off and get a little root or so, or even if it's just a stem, plant those pieces in the border and they should flush out for you. Every single one I planted has grown out, and now this is just going to become a thicker hive of this lovely Heuchera, and I will get these lovely pink flowers all the way through the border for a long time to come. The wonderful thing about this plant is that it is evergreen. So I get to see these beautiful plants all year round, every season, from the windows of our crystal cottage behind me here. So this is absolutely beautiful. And in this part of our botanical garden, I have planted a lot more evergreen plants because we need to be able to see green all year round outside our windows, because for around 8 months of the year, the only plants we have to look at are the evergreens or the red dogwood with its beautiful bright red stems. So I've been working on this, the botanical garden area here, for the last 6 years, from when I first bought the cottage. And this whole area of the garden was overgrown completely with all sorts of wild plants, lots of trees and all sorts. I had to go in and hack everything back. It was like a jungle, push everything back to be able to recreate this area. All of these borders you see, I have moved every single stone and built the borders myself, and with the help of my husband, also helping move some of these rocks around. And I've used the elements that are in the garden already, so large rocks, of course. I've built a border with plants around that, around the trees that were already established here, the mature trees. I have built borders around those so that they become part of the overall thing. And it's wonderful to find elements in the garden that you can use as part of your design and incorporate so that your garden looks much more mature, much quicker as well, actually. The apple trees you can see in the middle here, I planted the very first year that I bought the cottage. They're 6 years old, they were very small. Every year they've produced maybe 1 or 2 apples. This year they look like they've flushed out with a lot of apples because we didn't get late frost in May that we usually get. So they've managed to keep the apples on them this year. There are 3 apple trees here, and I'm sure with time, the more they mature, the more we'll have cascades of apples, and I just can't wait for that. Beautiful loose stripe. My magnolia looks wonderful. The Weigela red prince. All of the other bushes behind here. Our lovely cottage. It would be an understatement to say that I absolutely love my garden. This is my sanctuary. This is the place I can feel safe. This is the place I can feel at peace. This is the place that I can enjoy, experiment, doing things with the gardens, being in touch with nature, being in touch with everything that's going on around me, not just the plants, but also the animals. We have deer that come into the garden here, all sorts of birds, amphibians, and we have different mammals like rabbits, squirrels. We have mice, we have voles, we have moles, we have everything here. I've just seen recently lizards in the garden, slow worms in the garden. We have common adders here. They're all very welcome. This is a sanctuary. I really wanted to make this into a wildlife friendly garden as well as being an enjoyable garden for us. So the Botanical Garden area, the Courtyard Garden area and the inner garden area. Most of these areas, the grass is kept short so that we can be in the areas. And I've bought a lot of plants in these areas, but the rest at the back, Silver Way, Crystal Woods, the Wild Orchard Garden, around the edges of the perimeter of our garden, and many of the beds also incorporate wild plants that come by themselves. And all the rocks and all the plants growing up have given so many animals habitats to live in. Our thuya bushes, there have been birds' nests in them every year since they've been planted. We also have bird boxes. Both the bird boxes have had life in them. They've had families in them, everything. And I am just so happy. I've even seen newts here. So there is everything. And that's why it's so important for us to get on now and get our pond finished so that we can start encouraging more of the amphibians and the animals that need to stay moist. So we'll have frogs and toads and newts, and also grass snakes like to be in the water. There'll be lots more habitats for more animals and also water-loving plants. So it really is a country garden, half kept, half wild, half experiment to see what copes with the very hot summer weather like now. It's very difficult for many plants. I don't want to have to water everything all the time. So it really is going to be a combination of seeing what can survive by itself. That's not to say that I don't water the garden at all. I do come out and water this area of the garden and the beds. We never water the grass. If it browns out, then it browns out. We know the grass will come back itself. Every year it lays dormant. But we're not going to spend any time watering grass here. There's too much grass. If I water anything, it will be some of the borders with some of the plants, especially flowering plants, because they need more moisture when they're flowering. But other than that, most things have to survive on their own. The whole Wild Orchard Garden, Crystal Woods, Silver Drive, Garden of New Beginnings, the Inner Garden, Cozy Cove, most of these areas don't get a drop of water than that comes. So they have to cope. And that is why we want to plant more trees to get more shade in the whole garden, because the trees are so important. Without the trees, the whole garden would just dry out and die. The areas where we have more canopy, the plants are happier and thriving much better and much thicker. So the more trees, the merrier. Make sure you plant trees. We all need trees. And because of global warming, the world is getting warmer in many places, even places like Sweden, where we still get winters with snow and so forth, but it's less and less every year. But the summers are getting hotter and hotter. We've had up to 32 degrees here. And it's been so hot I haven't been able to do anything in the garden. I can only work in the garden when it's a nice temperature, which is around about max 25 degrees. But 32 degrees, it's so difficult, and everything just wilts and starts drying out so quickly, and it's not enjoyable for anything here. So we want a nice stable balance in the temperature to keep a nice garden as well. But you just have to choose things that can survive and work well. And that's what I've tried to do. So I really hope you enjoyed seeing all the different areas of my garden here. so that you have more perspective of what I'm showing you in my various different videos when I'm doing projects and moving plants around and rearranging borders and propagating and all sorts of other things that I'll be doing in my garden. So for all you houseplant lovers out there, you also got to see some of my house plants here, plants that can't be outside all year round in Sweden. You saw my Monstera deliciosa outside. You saw my beautiful Scindapsus pictus silverian outside. You saw my Alocasia zebrina outside. You saw different varieties of my Dracaenas outside, my Sansevierias. So I do have a few of my house plants around and about in the garden as well at the moment, and that's really, really nice while I'm here. So all I have to say now is thank you very much once again for watching Gardens and Crystals with me, Wesley Peterson, and this tour of our garden here at Crystal Cottage. And all I have to say now is please remember to like, subscribe and hit the bell so you know when my next video will be coming up, and I will see you again very, very soon. Goodbye.